With the fall of France, 1940, Charles de Gaulle fled to Britain to keep the resistance alive for a free France. However, after the exit of Britain from the war following the Anglo-German armistice, all hopes were lost. To forestall the threat of an independent free France posed to its African holdings, Britain stepped in and seized French Africa south of the Sahara from the Pétain government in Vichy. From these holdings, our semi-independent government, led by former French colonialists under high British control, arose. But this agreement was never meant to be lasting. The Charles de Gaulle loyalists are demanding that the British occupier leaves and the African majority call for greater autonomy and even independence. Radical change must take place or else French Africa will collapse. On the industrial front, our economy is lacking. We are only a semi-industrial nation and our poor industrial capabilities have rendered our non-existing industry useless. And while British rule is being questioned around our country, we will slowly begin to improve our industry. A few days later, the situation escalated when protests in Dakar against the British turned bloody. Even the local elites joined the protest side and together they issued a letter to the colonial government, demanding democracy, greater autonomy and rights to vote for our own prime minister instead of the British choosing him. Under the increased pressure, the French authority caved in and asked the British to consider the proposal. And with both the French authority and its people calling for reforms, the British approved of them. Political movements have organized themselves into clear parties and our country is ready for its first election. No longer will the British run our West Africa, our people will. The various parties are now beginning to spread the word across our country with their own agenda. The first election is prepared and 3 distinctive parties have put forward their own prime ministers. The Free French expatriates who represent the bourgeoisie colonials and civil servants in the cities, the liberals who seek egalitarianism for all, and the federalists who seek to transform us into a true federation of equals. With an impressive 54% turnout rate, the votes were counted and as expected, Free France with Charles de Gaulle struck a massive victory. The utmost priority of his administration is to reclaim the homeland. We shall return home. But we can't return if the British still reign over our exiled state. Negotiation with Britain will begin and our independence will be secured. Charles de Gaulle travelled to London with the aim of securing our recognition as the one true France. In the meantime, our new administration had already nationalized our first civilian factory and we have begun the armament process. We can't return to France without arms. After 2 weeks, Charles de Gaulle returned with great news. He has secured total independence and the British are already leaving our country. But while we can fully prepare for our goals now, we are alone with no international allies. Therefore, the next logical step is to try and rejoin the Toronto Accord, the last bastion of peace, as a partner and not a puppet. The Americans, despite backlash from the illegitimate government in Paris and the devils in Germany, still allowed us to join the pact. And with it, considerable investments from the American arms industry arrived. We can now begin to prepare our armed forces for the difficult road to Paris. Right now it only consists of 12,000 men in light infantry formations. To get new conscripts we will attract French nationals from all over the world who are ready to fight against the illegitimate government. With their help, the mighty military history of France will be reborn. The expansion of our armed forces will begin, including the formation of the Foreign French Legion, opening the door to non-French people to fight for our nation. So we will expand our divisions to 10 with and train 6 new of them. Due to the American arms investments, we should have enough guns to supply them. But a growing army won't help if our soldiers stay defeatist. Ever since our loss against the German Blitzkrieg, both our population and the army has been plagued by it. We will root it out of our country through patriotism and even propaganda. The pride of France will return. And while we had planned for it to take years to completely destroy it, it came as a gift from heaven when the news of Hitler's death arrived. The person who has destroyed us will finally live in hell for all eternity. And in Paris, the illegitimate government was also shook when their leader, Maxime Weygand, was shot dead. The hope of us returning home is bigger than ever. So we have to continue to prepare. Ever since we won the election, the African locals have protested against our government. To end this debate once and for all, we will promise them freedom after we have reclaimed the mainland. This way, many Africans will join the fight against the fascists. A few months ago, the illegitimate government forces in Africa were withdrawn and Algeria and the Sahara declared independence. Soon the Saharan tribal government collapsed and we could seize their 3 desert states. But in Mauritania, a separate republic was declared. We must reclaim this colony to get its resources for our return to France. And this will also train our divisions which haven't fought in a war for more than 10 years. So we initiated a border conflict with the Mauritanian tribes. Our hopes of a quick victory were crushed almost immediately as the conflict almost stalled. It took more than 4 months for us to gain the upper hand and win. Mauritania is now ours again, but the prolonged conflict has shown our weakness. We lack firepower. Luckily, we have continued expanding our military industry and we have begun producing artillery and basic anti-tank weapons. So we can add support artillery to our divisions and expand them with normal infantry instead of light ones. While we wait for the divisions to get supplied, we will ratify our claims on the mainland and make it clear to them that we will return and save France. But before we start the struggle, we will ask the British to give back our overseas colony. And to support us, they gave them back, both our Caribbean colonies like French Guiana and those close to Madagascar like the Comoro Islands. So we are now ready to return home. Our troops will go to the UK to prepare for a naval invasion. We won't call in the Toronto Accords due to the risk of a German escalation, but since they're in a civil war we should be fine. And naval supremacy won't be a problem. We have a carrier and battleships while the illegitimate government only has destroyers since they aren't allowed anything more. Our army size seems to be similar due to the heavy reparations they have been forced to pay, but we need to hurry. After the death of Maxime Weygand, Jacques Doriot, a fascist and a successor of Pétain, has started to renounce the German treaties and build up his army. The British radar stations have given us the information that only a single division is present in the port of Cherbourg. This is the perfect area to land. Our forces launched from the ports in England and we could quickly encircle the city. But reinforcements from the French state arrived quickly and we couldn't capture Caen. Still, the port of Cherbourg was seized and now we only have to hold it. But that's easier said than done. The illegitimate government had tank divisions which our small amount of old anti-tank weapons couldn't do anything about. After slowly losing control of the battle, we decided to retreat to the Channel Island. This has gone horrible. We need help from our allies if we want to win this war. Luckily, the Americans were more than eager to join and the British, scared of an invasion of the Channel Island, also decided to join. We will now wait until their help arrives. In the meantime, we prepared an invasion of Brest to help the British planning to land in Lorient. But we had to abandon the plan. The Americans had already arrived to England and launched an invasion of Le Havre. We must immediately help them so we can be the ones liberating Paris. But we were too late. The elite American soldiers overwhelmed Doriot's army and entered Paris only a few days after landing. Soon we had arrived too and could aid the Americans who were expanding at a rapid pace. In Bretagne, the British had catched up and managed to capture Brest. Together our allies managed to encircle Cherbourg and we could help them out to capture the numerous garrisons in the city. While the British were going down to Bordeaux, our forces in Paris managed to capture Orléans and Tours. The legitimate government had already fled to Italy, and with our allies' massive forces, their armed forces were forced to surrender. We are back. Our long struggle against Pétain and his successor is over. Charles de Gaulle has saved the French people. All the exiles will be called to return home and aid us rebuilding our home. While the war was short, it was destructive for the infrastructure of France. Still, with the massive industry compared to the little we had in Africa, we will succeed in rebuilding our country. No longer are we a semi-industrial state and our poor industrial capabilities are now good. And to bolster our economy at the same time, we will begin to open France to the global market. With the mainland recaptured, we have access to the plenty of cheeses and wines that we can export to the consumer market of America. But there is something we have forgotten. Oh yes, Africa. We promised them independence, and they have already started rising up since we haven't given it to them yet. So before anything bad happens, we will withdraw our institutions and grant them independence. Farewell, Africa, and thanks for the help. Back to France, our army is too small to protect ourselves. Our allies have had to keep troops in our territory to keep away the Germans. But relying on our allies is never the solution. Remember, France has no friends, only interests. Our army must become self-reliant, and luckily the groundwork is already here for us. The illegitimate government had 14 military factories, more than enough to reform our army. We will replace all light divisions with normal infantry, providing them with more anti-tank weapons. Equip them with logistic companies, signal companies and anti-air, a temporary solution against the Luftwaffe of Göring. Now we do lack more equipment, but we have time on our side. Our economy is growing while the German is still stagnating. But our army is nothing without a doctrine, and copying those of the British and the Americans isn't an option. So we will try our best to obtain our full potential strength through a new modern French doctrine. Meanwhile, in the east, the Germans had started the reconquest of their Neue Ordnung by declaring war on Poland. There is nothing we can do about it. Last time we tried was a disaster. But we have started training several more divisions despite lacking the equipment. So, to relieve the situation a bit, we will begin to build new military factories too. A long time later, we have progressed on our path towards a modern doctrine. Among other things, we created a military academy. To keep external forces away from our country, we have also created the Direction Générale de la Sécurité Extérieure, our own intelligence agency like the Abwehr or the CIA. And our military is now 2 full armies with 24 divisions each. And rightfully so, the Germans have taken over Poland and the Reichskommissariat Ostland has been re-established. But infantry won't help in offensive actions. For that we need armored vehicles with high firepower. Charles de Gaulle, a vivid supporter of the tank, has decided to go with the European design of lightning war. We have already started producing armored personnel carriers and infantry fighting vehicles which will serve as the main vehicles in our own tank divisions. But we will also add some heavy self-propelled artillery. Meanwhile in the east, the Wehrmacht had blitzkrieged through Ukraine and the Soviet remnants in former Moscovian. The German New Order is now massive again. Maybe time isn't on our side. With all their new colonies, their industry will definitely start to grow again. But our tanks aren't ready at all. We have the industry, we have even started building our own interceptors, leaders. We simply lack the military experience to set up a good tank division. June 1960, 5 years after we returned home, our 10 tank divisions were deployed and trained. Stage 2 of the liberation can commence. The liberation of the lands annexed by Germany. Our whole army has been mobilized except 15 divisions which will protect our borders with the Mediterranean Pact. The fight will be difficult. The Germans have been the military leaders for a while now, and their fanatic population are prepared to fight to the death for their country. But still, our allies had promised to help us, so we declared war. The Germans had anticipated our attack, and their 3 main branches of military were prepared. On the ground, everything is fine, no German attacks, but in the sky they are severely outnumbering us. Still, with British radar and our new interceptors, we can shoot down plenty of German aircrafts. But on the sea, the Germans have started raiding our important trading convoys that hold our industry together. Despite us holding alone, we must call the rest of the Toronto Pact to deal with these submarines. They gladly joined, but they will mostly only fight in the air and on the water. They refused to send large land reinforcements. Since the Germans haven't dared to attack us, we will strike at them first. The goal of our first offensive was to capture 2 airports in northern France, and it was surprisingly easy. The German divisions almost melted when they met our tank divisions. So we decided to continue and tried to encircle them just like they did to us in Dunkirk. We managed to liberate Lille almost immediately, but after that we had troubles to reach the English Channel. The Germans kept reinforcing the area, so soon we were forced to halt our offensive. Instead, we drove south a few kilometers and tried a smaller pincer movement. This one was more successful, and we encircled a ton of valuable German divisions. It seems we have effectively stolen the German doctrine and turned it towards them. We now had a bigger front with Dunkirk and could quickly enter it. All of northern France is liberated. We must now turn east and save the people of Alsace and Lorraine. We decided to begin our attack in the north of the region since the Germans were the weakest here. Our allies have established complete air superiority and begun bombing German supply. Just as before, it wasn't difficult to break through, and with the help of some infantry we had soon reached Metz. The Wehrmacht had massive problems to fill the gaps we had created, and we could continue east even though the closest supply hub was further and further away. After only a few days we had captured Strasbourg, the capital of Alsace, and Nancy. To get supply to the area we had to build a railway, and after only 20 days it was finished. But in the meantime, the Germans had reinforced the whole front as they recruited more and more personnel. Luckily, they still have one apparent weakness. They lack supply in the city of Besançon, and without it we quickly broke through and could capture it. They still didn't have any defense in depth, and our quick tanks could simply drive into Switzerland. We captured all major Swiss cities, Bern, Basel, Zurich, and we even encircled Genève, destroying its German garrisons. We sadly lost Zurich after a small German counteroffensive, but instead of trying to recapture it, we turned north from Mulhouse and managed to encircle the last German divisions in France. After killing them all and inflicting more than 1,000 casualties, all of France occupied by Germany is liberated. We can't stop here, all of Germany must be destroyed. The Greater German Reich must cease to exist. all land on the west of the Rhine has been captured, we have even managed to cross the river in the Netherlands. Without an air force, the German army has been doomed. Years of neglect and corruption in the Luftwaffe has allowed us and our allies to totally destroy it. We tried to enter Amsterdam, but the Germans and its Reichskommissariats had many divisions protecting the city, so instead we turned south and successfully entered Rotterdam. But after that we got stopped. We will leave the Germans in the Netherlands alone now. If they rather defend that than their nation, it is fine for us. So we found a new area to cross the Rhine River in the north of Switzerland. Despite the supply hub behind the German lines, they still had some supply problems. And we have developed a new fighting vehicle, the attack helicopter. Together with our tanks, our dream of lightning warfare will be fulfilled. We tried to use our infantry as well, but they failed to cross the river. Luckily, our tanks made the crossing in the southern province, and from there we moved north, slowly capturing more and more of the eastern Rhine. As we reached outside of Stuttgart, we turned to the city, and as we captured it, we decided to continue more west. With none too few German divisions per tile, we could use our fast tank divisions to 100% and we had soon reached Nuremberg. The German army is destroyed. We never expected to reach this east into the nation this fast. So let's end the beast. Frankfurt, Essen and Dortmund, München and even Hanover. We captured all easily. We are now bordering Brandenburg. The road to Germania is open. Before we could enter Germania, we first had to capture Magdeburg, but this was no problem and we soon began the process of encircling the German capital. Supply was starting to run low, but the Germans lacked more equipment than we did and the city was encircled. Germania was quickly captured, but their leaders had already fled. Still, Germania, or now Berlin, is seized. The Nazis have no way to recover. Back to the Netherlands, our allies have landed behind their lines and we could renew our offensive. The area was actually more important than we thought since it is German cores. Together with our tanks, our infantry could both from the north and the east enter Amsterdam and force the Germans to The Hague. But we didn't stop here and they were soon kicked out to the sea. Back to mainland Germany, our American and British allies have liberated most of Denmark and already captured Kiel. 3 American divisions have also landed all the way in West Prussia. One last offensive to Hamburg and the Germans will surrender. We didn't have the patience to wait for our tanks, so we began our offensive with our infantry. Wilhelmshaven was open and the divisions in Bremen were easily kicked out. With the help of Danish divisions attacking the north of Hamburg, we split their defenses and successfully entered the city. Following the retreat of the Germans, the Nazi government surrendered and the Reichskommissariats too. The war against Germany is over, and both a trial and a peace conference will be held. In the trial, most Nazis were sentenced to death, of course, and in the peace deal, a lot of Europe was reshaped. Germany was shrinked on all fronts and the countries they've occupied have been liberated. In the east, the Baltic countries are free and Ukraine has been established. The Russian Republic, the only remnant left of a Russian nation, has also been given all of Russia. In Germany, we re-established democracy, but of course it is under our supervision. But fascism isn't gone from Europe and all of France isn't liberated. The Italians own Savoy and Corsica, 2 integral parts of our country. If we destroyed Germany, the soft underbelly of Europe won't be a problem. Furthermore, we will get help from the newly established Swiss nation and the communists in Yugoslavia who have already declared war anticipating our attack. So, together with Switzerland, we declared the war. Italy is destroyed and the democratic coup in Spain bring Franco down. France is completely unified. The goal of Charles de Gaulle has been reached. The world has been saved from the Nazi and fascist menace, all thanks to us and the Toronto Accord. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.